Yeah, okay, we're live.
Should I go? Hello, everyone. My name is Mbula Nzuki. Yeah. Hello, everyone. My name is Mbula Nzuki, and we welcome you to the Rule of Law Webathon. Today's panel is on the role of lawyers in the fight for affordable healthcare for all. I will start by introducing our amazing lineup of speakers, starting with Mr. Stanford Moyo, who is a Zimbabwean lawyer serving as the current president of the International Bar Association. Upon his assumption to the AIJA Presidium, Stanford became the first person of African descent to lead the organization in its 74 years of existence. Mr. Moyo is the senior partner and chairperson of one of the Zimbabwean's oldest and largest law firms, Scanlon and Holderness, a firm which he joined in 1981. He is also widely regarded as one of the leading corporate and commercial lawyers in Southern Africa. In addition, he is a former president of both the Law Society of Zimbabwe and South African Development Community Lawyers Association, co-chairperson of the Human Rights Institute of the International Bar Association, chairman of Stanbic Bank Zimbabwe Limited, a leading commercial bank in Zimbabwe, which is a member of the Standard Bank Group, chairman of Zim, and also the Zimbabwe Revenue Authority, and director of several other companies, including Alpha Media Holdings. We are privileged to have you, Mr. Moyo, and he's going to be touching on matters healthcare as well as mental health for lawyers, as well as COVID-19 and how that has impacted us. Second is going to be Mr. John Chigiti, Senior Counsel. Mr. Chigiti is a partner in the firm of Chigiti and Chigiti Advocates with 22 years post-admission experience. He is a counsel at the International Criminal Court, ICC, and the African Court, a director of the Legal Resources Foundation, LRF, and certified professional mediator. His practice areas include family law, pro bono work, public interest litigation, and human rights cases, including intersex persons, informal settlements and housing, marginalized and minority groups, and the rights of persons with disabilities, statelessness, refugees, the environment, and prisoners. He is a pro bono lawyer of the year awards from Amnesty. He won the pro bono lawyer of the year awards from Amnesty International, the LSK Nairobi Lawyers Award, the Cradle and Kituo cha Sheria. He is a lecturer at the Kenya School of Law since the year 2014 to 2019. He has been a trial advocacy trainer and director with the Trial Advocacy Training Institute. Mr. Chigiti offers mentorship at Strathmore University and the Advanced Mentorship, Counseling and Mediation Limited, AMC. He has authored the book Intersex Persons and the Law in Kenya. He is currently writing Family Law Talks and the Client and the Lawyer books. He is a director at the Rotary Club and plays the saxophone with the Nairobi Lawyers Music Band. Mr. Chigiti, having worked on the Intersex Persons book and also working with these minority groups, he's going to be giving us that kind of perspective today in today's panel. And we are privileged to have you, Mr. Chigiti. Thank you very much. Thirdly, we're going to be having Dr. Steve Adandan, who is a medical doctor. Steve is a Kenyan-born, UK-trained public health and infectious disease specialist with over 10 years global health and entrepreneurial experience, having received his undergraduate Doctor of Medicine and surgery training at the University of Nairobi School of Medicine and postgraduate training in infectious diseases at the University of London, London School of Hygiene and Tropical Medicine. He is currently the founder and CEO of GEAR Health Systems, a health technology company disrupting access barriers to quality healthcare in Africa by leveraging on cutting-edge technology. He is also a governing board member of Akanova Africa, a nonprofit seeking to attain equitable access to healthcare for vulnerable populations. Dr. Steve served as a country director for Rice University's Nest 360 Newborn Survival Program in Kenya and CEO, he would tell, a public-private partnership medical oxygen generation enterprise, and Mediquip Global, a biomedical equipment distribution, repair, and maintenance social enterprise. Hewatel runs 3 oxygen plants in Kenya, serving at least 10 million people with affordable and quality medical oxygen. He is passionate about championing resilient and sustainable solutions for health care problems in developing countries. Dr. Steve, we're honored to have you on board, and we can't wait to hear what you have to say in today's topic. Last but not least is Ms. Samira Hassan. Ms. Samira is a Somali-American storyteller, communication strategist, and social entrepreneur with a unique professional background spanning the areas of pharmacy, health promotion, education, project management, community engagement, and media. Most recently, Samira championed inclusive financing for the Sustainable Development Goals in developing countries and emerging markets at the World Economic Forum in Geneva, Switzerland. She has also honed advocacy and partnership expertise at the World Health Organization headquarters and led community health literacy programming in rural Belize with the United States Peace Corps. She continues to support strategic communications and media as an independent consultant with a variety of clients, including international organizations, purpose-driven companies, and NGOs. In 2019, Samira launched Chronicle Health, a creative social impact platform and bespoke strategic advisory firm, placing storytelling at the forefront of global health and international development. Filmed in collaboration with Meraki Africa, Chronicle Health premiere documentary, Road to Resilience, a community health story of Lunga Lunga, was recently announced as one of the official selections for the World Health Organization Health for All Film Festival 2022 under the category Universal Health Coverage. Samira has lived and worked in Belize, China, the UK, Switzerland, and Kenya. She has a Bachelor of Arts in International Politics and World Affairs with a certificate in Peace Studies and Conflict Resolution from the University of Wisconsin, and a Master of Science in Public Health with a focus of health promotion from the London School of Hygiene and Tropical Medicine. Ms. Samira, we are privileged to have you, and we can't wait to have your insight as far as community engagement is concerned. And my name is Mbula Nzuki. I am founder and managing partner at MN Legal, a boutique law firm based in Nairobi, Kenya. And I also happen to be the national representative for AIJA in Kenya. I will be the moderator for the day. Without much further ado, I will delve into the questions. And my first question is going out to Mr. Moyo and Mr. Chigiti, respectively. Virtually all states or countries recognize either by express statute or common law the right to access to healthcare, which includes receiving information about one's medical condition, the treatment choices available, risk associated with treatments, possible outcomes, and prognosis. Is this the case in your countries, the countries that you represented on this panel, and is the mere provision for this right sufficient to ensure affordability? And what would you change? Mr. Moyo, you go first.
Thank you. First of all, let me express my gratitude and appreciation for the invitation to participate in this important discussion. I'm also pleased to see that this discussion is being led by young lawyers, because that does give us confidence as to the future of the profession. Back to your question, yes, the right to health is provided for in the Zimbabwean Constitution. We also have regulations regulating health insurance, such as the activities of medical aid societies. Is that enough? No, obviously that is not enough. And lawyers have to do more to ensure that there is affordable health. The starting point being to appreciate that healthcare begins before one is sick. In other words, As lawyers, we have got to make sure that the environmental laws, which are aimed at ensuring that people are safe and healthy, are enforced and are observed. Also, we have got to pay particular attention to ESG matters in our countries. We've got to look at what the corporates are doing, litigate wherever necessary, try to make sure that the legislation itself is adequate. Where it's not adequate, try to make sure that it is adequate. Where, for instance, there are violations endangering people's health, we have got to ensure that those are dealt with, and that may involve litigating if necessary. We also have to look at other causes of health deterioration, such as bullying and harassment in the workplace. It is our responsibility as lawyers to identify some of these activities and make sure that they are brought to a stop before people even get sick. IBA did conduct an investigation into this area and found that a substantial number of lawyers were facing health issues, mental health issues, because of bullying and harassment at the workplace. And that is already a threat to their health. So, as I said, healthcare really begins before one is sick. So you've got to take all action you can to ensure that people are protected from those factors that may endanger their health, including ESG matters, as I pointed out earlier. You also need to look at circumstances under which healthcare institutions may turn away people who require medical attention. If a person, for instance, has been involved in a traffic accident and is taken by a good Samaritan to a health institution, there must be laws regulating circumstances under which that person may be refused treatment. In general, there should be no refusal of treatment in circumstances of that nature. So that's the starting point, really. You've got to look at the overall environment and try to make sure that people are protected. You also need to look at issues such as access to vaccinations. Access to vaccines, for instance, we saw during the pandemic, during the COVID pandemic, that whereas the rest of the world was slowly returning to normalcy, the developing world was still afflicted by COVID in a very serious way. So that type of inequality is also not good for healthcare. So lawyers have to, first of all, advocate. Embark on advocacy to ensure that vaccines are affordable, vaccines are available to members of the public, including those in poor countries. That involves looking at intellectual property laws which restrict the distribution of those vaccines. So it is lawyers really who have got to look at that. In circumstances of emergency, such as the COVID emergency that we're looking at, one may have to provide for compensation to the owners of intellectual property after people will have been treated, as opposed to trying to put property rights ahead of safety of people.
Amazing. Thank you so much for that very elaborate answer, Mr. Moyo. I will circle back to you, but first let's hear it from Mr. Chigiti. What's the situation in Kenya, and what would you do different? Or what should we as lawyers do different?
Greetings all. I'm very privileged to be here with all of you, including my seniors from across the other side of Africa and others from across the oceans. It's not always that we mingle, but the way we are mingling here, the young and the old, continental, internationally. So indeed, it's a great platform that you have placed us on. Yes, in Kenya, the situations flowing from the constitutional provision of the right to access to health under the article known as 43, which guarantees everybody to the right to health. We are growing in that ECOSOC platform. It's very new. We must say, when we speak to the language that we are speaking today, we want to ask ourselves, how accessible is this right? Quantitatively and in terms of quality. We must say that we need to speak to the questions around equality. Is everybody accessing Medicare? Is everybody accessing medicine? Is everybody able to access the counselors? And even if you talk of accessing the hospitals, how well equipped are they? Do we have ample medication? Do you have enough professionals, doctors, nurses? We must also look at the cost of accessing this medication. It is incomplete without information. We have our constitution which guarantees us the right to access to information. Are we speaking in the direction of information health? What is the role of the lawyer? What is the role of the NGO? What is the role of the Ministry of Health in terms of disseminating information? We must commend the government for having devolved the medical facilities to the counties, so that it's not just centralized, not placed only in the capitals, but it's available in the smaller spaces in the villages. But what about us as lawyers? What can we do to push the government to allocate more funding in the budget so as to equip the spaces that I have just spoken to? We must again not be bashing the government all the time, because it has done a project which is a social security, which is a national health insurance fund, which is ensuring that everybody is getting access to medication. Our constitution has a provision in Article 48, which speaks to access to justice. In the constitution, in the chapter 10 organs, the courts have a duty to ensure that it's generating orders and directions that will enable everybody to get redress, to get access to all these reliefs that are available in the constitution in the event of violation. So the question then is, dear lawyer, dear colleague, are we litigating enough to bring redress? Instances of people being detained in hospitals because of inability to settle hospital bills. Dear lawyer, cross there, what are we doing about that? The courts are very awake, very alive, but they're waiting for us. They're waiting for the lawyers. Instances are like maternal health questions. We have a very good judgment in one of our courts in Bungoma, where a lady delivered on the floor, and the judge was able to drive the process, interrogated the nature of the policies, the structure in the hospital. And the question was, what are the numbers in the hospital in terms of beds? What are the numbers in terms of doctors? Why is it that a lady has to deliver, lose her dignity at that level on the floor so helplessly? So the question again is, what can we do? There is a lot that we can do, because the judges are waiting to give redress. Another example is the right to health around the students, who I'm sure in all countries it's happening, where they're victims of defilement in the hands of the teachers. We are seeing very many students losing school, losing their right to education in the hands, ironically, of the teacher who is supposed to empower them. What are we doing? Are we leaving it to the prosecution only? Can we push the key, the button beyond, and ask ourselves, can we sue the violation on the right to health, because they then get exposed to vices which were not existing in their lives because of their teachers? They get exposed to abortion, early pregnancies, become parents very early in life. Can the courts do something? Yes, indeed. Again, we have celebration in Kenya because we have a judgment where we drove the judge to give us orders for compensation for 2 victims of defilement by teachers. And what is interesting is that the judge said that we need to look at the policies the medical, legal, psychosocial support policies which are lacking in the ministry, in the Teacher Service Commission conversations. We also are looking at questions senior citizens. Our constitution is protecting the senior citizens, but we are not doing enough. We need to, uphold, promote, and fulfill the duty to protect. These are the most vulnerable members of our community. They have made the nations to be what they are. They are heroes, but when you look at their health condition, really it's wanting. Can we ask the courts as lawyers to generate interdicts that will ensure them even to get easy medical cover, easy access to medicine? They're not very many. They're not many, and we can carry them, we can support them through litigation. Then the other core concern is around issues like safe abortion. It is a global conversation. We have seen it recently in the US. Mm-hmm. We need to understand, what is it? We have our Article 26 that gives a guarantee, but the structure is really not clean. We are the Supreme Court trying to get a clean appreciation, understanding of how we can limit, how we must not limit, either way, the right to free, safe abortion. And then second but not least, my senior, Sanford Moore, mentioned the issue of intellectual property rights. We are going nowhere if we are not going to invest in research, in the protection of these brands that belong to this place, known as Africa and others, wherever we are generating medication. We have a lot of medicines in Kenya, which is available in the traditional form, in our trees, in our vegetation, in our forests, but we have no legislation. Dear Steve, what can we do? Do you want us? Do you want our traditional medication? We must embrace that. It belongs to us, and we'll find that it is more than accessible than the conventional medication. Lastly, alternative dispute resolution mechanisms and access to medicine and access to justice. Can we do something to push the agenda beyond, so that away from court, we can also say that we can talk, we can dialogue, we can get solutions. We don't have to run to court all the time. Alternative dispute resolution mechanisms are cheaper, accessible to many of the victims who might not afford lawyers. And what about the legal aid platform? Dear Council, how much pro bono work are we doing? Thank you, Mbula.
Wow, fantastic. You've really done great with that question. And maybe for me, my takeaways are, is this a clarion call to young lawyers, or just lawyers generally, to delve into public interest litigation? And secondly, does this also mean that we also need to look at ADR in access to medicine? I really like the connotation ADR for access to medicine. I like that you talk of legal aid and pro bono work and calling lawyers to give this particular faction of law a lot of thought, and also for us to delve into that as lawyers. And then I also particularly take away the importance of research and brands into alternative medication or alternative medicine. And this is very timely discussion. So for any lawyers listening, public interest litigation, you've been told, and also ADR for access to medicine, please take note. Thank you so much, Mr. Chigiti. We'll be coming back to this. But before we do, I would like for us to now take a bit of a detour to Samira Hassan. So, Ms. Samira Hassan, you describe Chronicle Health as a creative social impact platform and bespoke strategic advisory firm dedicated to storytelling for collaborative action in global health and international development. I've just quoted that from your bio. Briefly, please tell us what exactly your day-to-day entails, and from the work you have been doing, how best would you advise lawyers to position ourselves in this collaborative effort? I'm particularly focusing on the collaboration aspect here, please.
Absolutely. Thank you, Mbula, for that question, and also for the invitation to be on such an esteemed panel, sitting amongst all of my fellow panelists. I'm very honored to be here, so thank you. So as you can see, Chronicle Health has kind of a twofold definition to who we are and the work that we do. So on one hand, as the creative social impact platform, we really work hard to center communities at the forefront of their narrative. And this is how we produce innovative and values-driven content that can inform and incite and inspire collaborative action. And then on the other hand, as a strategic advisory firm, we work hand in hand with individuals and teams across development sectors in order to shape tailored pathways for integrating inclusive storytelling into project and program design. So our overall mission really looks like advocating for and utilizing storytelling in order to build kind of a contextual understanding and informed, context-driven and inclusive sustainable development across global health and other sectors as well. So what does that look like in practice? We work with companies and organizations across sectors by elevating those who are striving to shift their approach to community programming and engagement, right? So making that more community-centered and less extractive, and then the community never sees them again, right? There are so many companies and organizations that are wanting to revolutionize that approach, and that's where we kind of step in to help them figure that process out. That also looks like consulting, developing frameworks for integrating storytelling into their work, research, mainly qualitative research, or pairing the qualitative to paint the picture for the quantitative, and kind of moving away from such a data and numbers driven approach to the human experience. That also looks like writing and content development. Another thing that we do is documentary filmmaking. And so that's more on our awareness pillar. And by doing that, we are able to develop original content within communities and kind of showcase their stories on a larger global platform. As we know, African countries in particular are not represented as much in mainstream media, and definitely aren't represented enough. And so a lot of our efforts have started in the African region, of course, and it's also around not just highlighting issues and talking about the problems, but also working with communities to figure out the solutions that would work best for them, right? And what that actually looks like in their context long after we wave goodbye. And so no 2 days are the same. I really admire what Mr. Chigiti mentioned around indigenous knowledge and kind of honoring that. And so we also work really hard to bridge that gap between the so-called credibility of scientific data and what we understand to be also the credibility and validity of indigenous knowledge as well within communities. And so no 2 days are the same, as I mentioned. And lawyers in particularly from the work that we've done have a really strong ability and opportunity here to help communities through policy advocacy, of course, right? Pushing governments to not only have stronger policies, but there's often no standard for working and engaging with communities. We see it time and time again where outside organizations are able to come into countries like Kenya, for example, on a tourist visa and go work with communities and extract the data or use other extractive processes to get stories or content or photos or videos in a way that's not always inclusive and that often leaves communities vulnerable. So what does kind of policy advocacy and enforcement kind of look like around those types of practices? There's also opportunities for follow-on in terms of, okay, if communities are being worked with, what is the follow-on process? Is there any standard to ensure that their data is being used in a way that they know where it ends up, where they're included and onboarded in that entire process beforehand? And then also just education in communities on policy. Sometimes they don't often know what their rights are, right? So when they are faced with collaborations that aren't always in their best interest, they can kind of be able to see the warning signs and be really careful about who they engage with. Particularly community leadership could have education on some of these things in a way that laypersons can understand. And so overall, I would just encourage lawyers to also engage with communities directly to see what they need. These are just examples that I'm giving, but they know best what they need, and they know best how that expertise could be used within their context. So I'll stop there for now. Thank you.
Fantastic. And actually, before you stop there, because I'm not done with you for the next 2 or so minutes, I like that you speak of all the points that you've given us, but I want to delve into one on data. In recent times, we've seen, we've glorified data and how important data is. We've talked about data protection and the place of that in today's community. In fact, we've gone in so far as calling data is the new gold of the 21st century. So when you talk of trying to deviate from the data-driven approach into more of the human approach, what does that do for you, and how did you arrive at this particularly? I would like to first hear more on that, because we're right now running more on data, but then you're giving us a different perspective. Give it to us.
100%. And by no means am I diminishing the importance of data. I think it's always going to be, the foundation of what we do, and it's going to give us valuable information. What I mean is kind of reintroducing the human experience to data. I think sometimes there's we diminish that aspect in favor of numbers. And so what it often can do is diminish community and individual experiences to numbers. And I think that can be sometimes harmful when it's missing the story related to it. It can be harmful when it's missing an element of empathy and understanding of what humans are experiencing. And so when humans are reduced to numbers, it kind of brings the solution building down to meeting specific targets or meeting specific objectives and goals that, while well-meaning, aren't always speaking to what communities are expressing their needs to be, or even their priorities to be. And so it becomes this revolving cycle of, trial and error, when if we started with storytelling as a foundational aspect of development, a lot of that can be avoided, and we can know what's needed from the start and integrate communities so that it's more sustainable as well. So, there's so much to it, but I think reintegrating, again, like I said, that human experience, reintegrating a sense of empathy and kind of understanding of what people are actually going through is going to actually empower the data and the numbers that we're using to come up with solutions.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. I will give you a break and go straight to Dr. Steve. So Dr. Steve, most private health insurers do not provide coverage of women's preventive healthcare, such as mammograms, screening for cervical cancer, prenatal care, and other services. As a doctor and an entrepreneur in the medical field, how has this impacted service delivery within the healthcare system, according to you? And what needs to change? Do you have any ideas on how to implement change for us as lawyers?
Yeah, thanks, Mbula, and it's wonderful to be in such a very, very eminent panel. I'm grateful to the organizers, and just to build on what Samira has just said about data. I mean, we're in the information age, and definitely health is a business, and because health is a business, the health ecosystem has in the center of it the patient, then you have the payer, the provider, and the other partners. So all these stakeholders have an interest, and this makes it very, very challenging because the patient has to talk to the payer, who's a health insurance, and also has to have interaction with the provider, who is a person providing, or the doctor, or the facility providing the service. At the same time, the partner, who is usually a manufacturer, who ensures that all these commodities are available. So all these stakeholders do have an interest with the patient at the center. But what happens is that we end up having late diagnosis of these conditions, which leads to poor outcomes. So most patients end up having, if it's cervical cancer or complicated pregnancy, because it's costly, and this cost is a hindrance because all these interests do exist. The other thing is that when you have a late presentation of some of these conditions, the healthcare costs are so high that patients sometimes can end up into bankruptcy. They have to sell a lot of property, or they have to borrow money so that they can be able to pay for the costs of care. And this is because technology and the providers globally, they're expensive. We cannot say it's only unique to certain areas. It's expensive. The third thing is that with this kind of hindrance in terms of a challenge of providing insurance for patients, it leads to poor behavior change. So a lot of patients do not embrace preventive and promotive health because it's expensive for them. They do not want to take any form of costs to make them prevent a condition. So what happens that they only wait for when they have a symptom. That's when they go and have a checkup. And embracing preventive and promotive health is very, very crucial, because prevention is the start of a cure for cancers, especially. It's and it's important that we have behavior change for the people. What needs to change? What needs to change is that we need to embrace a value-based care model. In a value-based care model, reimbursement is based on outcomes rather than numbers, because it's efficient, is effective, it's timely, it's patient-focused, and it's equitable. Value-based care model is a model that now is coming out as a model that is much more better in terms of taking care of the patient's needs, and also ensuring that there is no an imbalance between the needs of the providers and the payers, and also the other partners. And our system actually is still trying to ebb slowly to that, because we currently have a lot of out-of-pocket payment and fee-for-service models. These ones are very, very leaning towards the insurance, leaning towards the other partners. The other thing is embracing digital health, and healthcare has been very slow in embracing digital health, because banks have done it to have much more inclusivity. Transport has done it to have much more efficient transport and logistics systems. But for digital health, I think what is central at digital health is a human-centered design, where it's not about talking to a bot or a robot or a machine, but much more seeing how do we leverage that technology so that somebody has better health care delivered to them. And we saw this very, very strongly, especially during COVID, where most people actually could order their meals, their shopping at the comfort of their houses because of lockdowns. But health still remains difficult, because most people feared the health facility because they were associated with death due to COVID. So how do we ensure that health goes to the doorstep of the patient? The other thing is zero rate taxing regimes for primary healthcare commodities. This is very crucial because we still have preventive commodities being taxed, like vaccines, or having a high price tag. How do we ensure that this preventive commodities are zero rated? When you talk about pap smears and all that, I mean, for cancer of the cervix, we know it's linked to an STD. So, and this STD has a vaccine. So why is it that we cannot be able to have a zero rated tax or a zero rated a free model for for the vaccine, so that people actually do have it, because there are different levels of care. So how do we ensure that we do have that? Last but not least is much more investment in local manufacturing of commodities, because if we don't have a local manufacturer of commodities, and healthcare still becomes costly. Governments need to have enabling environments, so that commodities for either vaccines or screening procedures need to be manufactured locally to reduce the cost, and also ensure that they're much more accessible. And this will have a very good ripple effect on employment and on the economy. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Dr. Steve. Before I let you go, I would like to take you back to the insurance conversation. And the reason why I would like us to maybe talk slightly about this is because I realize that insurance for many people in developing world remains a luxury. And even with that being said, with insurance, private insurance, so to speak, being a luxury for many people because it's not very cheap, it still does not cover as many things. Like even for when I look at my personal insurance, before I changed it, it did not cover some of the things that health women would need as part of their covers. What can be done? Like for instance, you'll have an insurance policy cover that covers just normal ailments, but when you go to see your doctor, your gynecologist, they tell you, this is not covered. You still have to reach into your pocket and pay for some of these things. The mammograms, the pap smears, unless sometimes you have to fake that you're an inpatient for you to get access to some of these things, which is terrible. So what should be done? Because I find this baffling that you have a cover that can't cover you.
Yeah, I think it's a very good one, because healthcare comes in different levels. So there is primary healthcare or preventive promotive, there's a curative, and there is a rehabilitative. I think there is need for more advocacy, especially for lawyers, for there to be legislation that ensures that preventive and promotive healthcare is made available, accessible, and should be the minimum. So we don't have a minimum right now. So what we would call an essential health package that would compel insurance companies to to have it as their minimum package. So if we do have a minimum essential package that has preventive and promotive, like a mammogram, it's a screening, that's preventive. So it should be something that is just basic and should be offered without butting an eyelid, because it'd be much more expensive for the country to actually take care of somebody who has full-blown cancer, God forbid, than somebody who just wants to have a screening. So I'll give you a good example. In Japan, they recognized that they had more patients who are having cancer of the stomach. So what did they do? They made it mandatory for everybody to have an endoscopy. So we need to also look at population-based data and put a face on the data. So saying that this country or this region, these are the top 5 conditions that are affecting people. So we have to make it mandatory, and it has to be accessible and affordable for people to access it. And insurance companies have to cover it. Okay. Now the other thing is, like I had mentioned, is a question of how strongly is the government invested in making some of these commodities available, like for prevention. So because if they make them available, then the insurance companies will still will have a much easier way of costing the insurance package for those who want to purchase. Because if you have a screening condition, a condition that needs to be screened, and you only have maybe 5 devices in the whole country, becomes quite expensive. So, and that is a question about what level of healthcare needs to be subjected to the market forces. So my thinking is at the level of preventive and promotive, this is where people need to have behavior change. This does not need to be subjected to market forces. People need to have the need and the leeway to just go into a facility and get the minimum package. Last but not least is as we talk about legislation, how there is access and there is utilization. So there has to be a community participation. And why I said this is dating back to the 1978 Alma Ata Declaration, where primary healthcare was something that was mooted by the WHO. And in this situation, community participation was seen to be a way that ensures that we're able to provide the best high quality care, meaning that somebody like you, your views need to be given in order for us to have a properly packaged essential health service. So how do we have a process of community participation so that we shape the essential healthcare package according to the needs of that community, instead of having a copy and paste? So those are some of the things that I think would be very, very critical. Thank you.
Brilliant. Thank you so very much. We'll be talking to you again shortly. So the next question goes to our very dear John Chigiti, Senior Counsel. Article 27 of the Constitution of Kenya provides safeguards and protects against discrimination of persons based on grounds which include sex, with the Kenyan Constitutional Court also reaffirming that intersex persons have the same human rights and fundamental freedoms under the Bill of Rights as any other person. As a very spirited champion and author of Intersex Persons and the Law in Kenya, what pushed you to fight for their rights? And have you witnessed any challenges that you would term unique to intersex children insofar as access to affordable healthcare goes?
Thank you very much. I'll first say that intersex persons exist globally in all the continents, amongst the various religions, and the upshot is that they are human beings. Our Constitution does not expressly define who intersex persons are, but it sets a ground for the protection of all persons. So once we appreciate that intersex persons are human beings, it goes without a doubt that they must enjoy the Bill of Rights, including the guarantee as provided by Article 27, which is a provision says that no one should be subjected to discrimination. The Universal Declaration on Human Rights, Article 1, is very clear, says that we are all born free and equal in rights and dignity. That applies to intersex persons. We did our first case in Kenya in 2007, when we brought a case to promote the rights of intersex persons. And the judges gave us what they gave us. We were able to acquire at least 20% in form of compensation for the intersex person who was suffering the loss of dignity in the way of body searches in the prison facilities. That case opened up the conversation around the intersex persons. However, the Constitution gave us a bigger window in 2010 when it then generated the actionability, justiciability of the socioeconomic rights. So that then we got a baby who was born around that time, who we thought would be a good test through public interest litigation to see whether indeed we are ripe for litigation around the rights of intersex persons. It was a huge success. The case generated a lot of push towards acceptance of the existence of intersex persons in Kenya. And amongst the items that we pushed in the petition was the right to health around the question of corrective surgeries. We were telling the judge that we must not promote surgery, the surgical conversations that force these children into artificial modification of their bodies. We are telling the judge that we identify with the bodily autonomy, the integrity of the person, and the dignity of the person the way they were created. And our front was big in terms of we would like them to be accepted just the way they are. However, we do appreciate, and we did have that conversation with the judge, that some of these conditions around the intersex person's condition present medical emergencies. Some of them, the doctors will confirm, expose them to cancers that are unique to them because of their chromosomal patterns, because of their gonadal setup, because of their genitalia setup, and the uniqueness in their form. So we were telling the judge that indeed, if at all a surgery is to take place on this person's body, it must be done in a manner that protects their health, in a manner that protects the best interest of the child principle, in a manner that protects the right to not to be subjected to torture, inhuman, degrading treatment. And the conversation we had with the court was, this is a child who is born this way. They don't create themselves. If the need for surgery is to take place, we have no legislation in Kenya. We have no statute whatsoever. We have no regulations. We have no bylaws. We have no rules. The space is just there. And we were telling the judge that it looks like the Nuremberg Code kind of experiments on the human body, which must stop. And we were then asking the judge to have a conversation around the age when the child must consent or has the capacity to consent to the surgeries. And the other question was, what is the best interest principle around these surgeries? Number 3, what is parental responsibility? Is it absolute? Can it be limited? And we were asking the judge to tell us, indeed, by way of a judgment, what is the best way forward, caught in this conflicting situation, where the doctors are saying they're going to conduct the surgery. The patient does not understand what is happening to their body. They're going to be left with bodily scars, emotional scars and injuries. The parents are in a state of panic. The state has no law. We're just there. How do we conduct such a surgery, knowing very well that it's going to impact on the right to health of this vulnerable child? Which is the safer route to take? Long and short, ultimately, the judge identified with our conversation, gave us a judgment that we are celebrating today in Kenya, and has then directed the Attorney General to come up with data of all the intersex persons in Kenya, their challenges, administrative-wise and otherwise, and we are currently rolling out, implementing some of those recommendations. We are going into hospitals. We are changing the curriculum. Parliament is now speaking about the rights of intersex persons. We now have a law which is known the Persons Deprived of Liberty Act, which has given us a definition of intersex persons. Parliament is now discussing the Children Act, is discussing the Registration of Persons Act, is legislating towards changing the Birth and Death Registration Act so as to incorporate intersex persons in our lives. Dear colleagues, fellow participants, fellow panelists, how is it in your nation? In Kenya, we are celebrating. The glove is out. I know we can do it. We are the seed that must die in order for the intersex child to have life. Thank you, Mbula.
Amazing. It's so inspiring just hearing you talk. And we must congratulate you for the amazing work and your contribution to all of this, Mr. Chigiti. This is fantastic. So just tying that closely, Mr. Moyo, what is it like in your country as far as intersex persons are concerned? Is that something you're willing to touch on very briefly?
No, there has been no litigation in Zimbabwe, as far as I'm aware, around that issue. But if any litigation were to take place, I have no doubt that because our constitution does recognize socioeconomic rights as well, the approach taken by the Kenyan courts, I think, would be considered highly persuasive.
Fantastic. Yeah, so what I'm taking from all of this is there has to be a lot of input as far as legislative gaps are concerned. We have to find ways in which we promote even private citizens to promote legislation, because sometimes unless a problem arises, some of these things will always remain untouched. So maybe this is a challenge to the rest of the people. And maybe this is not just for lawyers. Anyone, I believe, can approach Parliament with the privately sponsored bills and that kind of stuff. So please take this as a challenge on your part, and in whatever field you feel moved in as far as human rights are concerned, do something. Now, Mr. Moyo, the next question goes to you, and it is as far as COVID-19 is concerned. So how has COVID-19 shaped the access to affordable healthcare and mental wellness conversation in your part of the world and generally?
Well, you know, I did touch on this earlier on. COVID-19 exposed the extent of inequality in the world in which we practice law today. As I indicated earlier on, you found that in the developed world, people were getting vaccinated and life was returning back to normal, whereas in the developing world, in Africa and other places, we were still under some restrictions. Even now, you will find that there are more restrictions in the developing world than you will find in the developed world. It is largely because of the extent of vaccinations in the developed world. And part of the reason is that we have not done enough work as far as intellectual property protection, and we have not done enough work as far as ensuring that we get the benefits of our resources. For instance, the distribution of the benefits of resources is uneven. There is a substantial amount of focus on investor protection and very little protection as far as the developmental rights of the communities where these resources are found. So although Africa is rich in resources, for instance, half of the world's gold is in Africa, 90% of the world's platinum is in Africa, but we could not afford the vaccines that were being purchased in other countries. There was talk of a manufacturing outfit here in Africa, in Southern Africa and South Africa. But initially, you know, the products manufactured, they were meant for exports from here, despite the fact that, you know, we equally needed the vaccines. So COVID-19 does expose an enormous amount of work lawyers have to do to ensure equality, to ensure that we fight against inequality, to ensure that we fight around ESG matters, so that you know, our communities get the benefit of the resources that are found in them.
Thank you so much for that, Mr. Moyo. We appreciate you. And Mr. Chigiti unfortunately has to attend to another urgent matter, but we would like to really thank him for his involvement in this particular panel. Thank you so much, Mr. Chigiti, for taking the time. We really do appreciate you.
Thank you very much for inviting me, and I wish we'll have more, and I'll call for the panelists to have another conversation behind the scenes. Mbula will organize for that. Thank you.
Absolutely will. Thank you so much, Mr. Chigiti. Have a fantastic one. Yeah, so moving forward, Mr. Moyo, I do appreciate your response as far as COVID-19 and how it has exposed the pitfalls in our healthcare systems in Africa and in the rest of the developing world, because I know it's not just Africa. So my other question will be, what do you think is the most primary goal for our governments as far as healthcare, access to healthcare is concerned?
So I didn't quite get the question. What
should the government's role be in providing access to healthcare for its citizens?
Yes. You know, even within countries, we saw within the same country, we saw a huge amount of inequality. For instance, the people in the informal sector found that they were most negatively affected by the COVID pandemic because, they rely on informal incomes. They have to go to the marketplaces which are crowded in order to earn a living. So socially distancing became very difficult for them. They rely on housing that is not, as commodious as those that are well off. As a result, when you talk of socially distancing as far as the poor were concerned, that really was not an achievable goal. So governments have to take a holistic approach, as I indicated earlier, instead of just dealing with situations where people have gotten sick. Try to prevent illnesses taking place by, for instance, providing adequate and affordable housing, proper housing, in other words, as opposed to the crowded shacks in which people found themselves in despite the pandemic. There has to be a substantial amount of work done towards ensuring that there is health insurance for all. We have introduced national social security, providing for benefits for workers, disability benefits, sickness benefits, but we have not done enough as far as national health insurance is concerned to make sure that everyone is covered. I liked a lot what the doctor said about starting with preventive measures, because health care, caring for people must place emphasis on what you do to prevent people getting sick, what you do before people even get sick. So there is quite a lot of work that we need to do as lawyers to ensure that there is realization of socio-economic rights if we are to achieve affordable health for all persons.
All right, thank you so much. I'll take that as a good answer from you, sir. My next question is going to Samira, and it's going to be very linked to exactly what you do at Chronicle Health. We note that you work very closely with women in the communities that you work. Is there any shouting challenges that you feel that women particularly encounter as far as access to health is concerned? And are there any opportunities for us to support Chronicle Health in the amazing work it's doing?
Thank you for that question. I think when we come to the conversation of women, we have to start with recognizing their place within the family. Oftentimes, what we've seen in communities, particularly in single parent households, of course, women are the main caregivers for their children. They are the main income earners within their households. And so they are not the only ones affected if they face health issues. Okay, so, I know it sounds mundane to mention, but sometimes that part is forgotten. And so it becomes a cycle of impacting the entire family structure if women are not well and are not thriving in as far as their health. And so that can look like a lot of different things. Non-communicable diseases, as we know, are the biggest killers in the world. They're the biggest causers of premature death, which is death under the age of 70. And so not only does it affect mortality, but it's also a big burden on quality of life. And again, if women are affected with these, it impacts their ability to earn and then take care of their households. On the subject of menstrual health, there's a huge impact for young women, and particularly when it comes to education. Menstrual limitations cause them to miss a lot of schooling, and sometimes they have to drop out completely if they've missed too much schooling. And so now we have a deficit in education based on no access to quality products, no access to other needs for menstrual health. There's a very little known fact that particularly in Africa, menstrual products, particularly pads, are made with chemicals and other irritants that cause additional health issues and are not of the same quality as the pads and products found in other countries, higher income countries. So that's a huge thing that, again, needs to be addressed. There's also contraceptive access. There's this, and I'm happy there are other men on this panel to hear these issues, because sometimes those aren't always highlighted in mainstream, and particularly within discussions where men are present. But we need that so that we know where the issues lie. There is a concept of contraceptive deserts, meaning there just is no access to contraception or sexual and reproductive health education, whether, depending on where the communities are placed, is just not available. And so how do we figure out what those experiences entail and then seek to address and improve the situation? In order to improve this, we need women-centered care, of course. We need education and screening, health literacy, simple, what some may find as basic information and messaging in some parts of the world is not basic and available information in other parts of the world. So how do we bring that forward so people even know when they should be going to get screened or tested for different things? Community health volunteers are often the number one kind of trusted trusted person in the community that people are kind of, they're the first point of contact often. How do we increase their training and give incentives to build stronger community health volunteer networks within communities? Because, women aren't going to be able to seek private care as a first point of care, right? So how do we make it work for their context? And then another thing I would say is uplifting healthcare innovation, especially in Africa. There's so many local solutions that remain untold, unseen. They don't have the opportunity to scale, but we fail to realize that there are often people in communities doing the work long before, or finding solutions that work for them. As an example, I can talk about a young woman who's from Thika in Kenya, where a lot of pineapples are produced. And she figured out a way to develop organic menstrual pads using the pineapple leaves, the fibers from the pineapple leaves, right? In her own community, she found that solution. She used corn husks, and she took the initiative to go to research labs to develop this pad that hopefully can scale and be accessible to women across Kenya and the rest of Africa. So there are innovations happening, but there aren't always the opportunities to grow those and scale those. And so Chronicle Health works to showcase this from an awareness and storytelling perspective, but sometimes these ideas and grassroots efforts are exploited by larger companies or organizations under the guise of support or sponsorship. And so founders are often left behind once certain things grow to a certain extent. So that's where lawyers can help step in, whether it's with trademarks, patents, whether it's with education on how to advocate for oneself when it comes to contracts and things like that uplift local innovations going to scale. So these are some of the things that come to mind right away, but there's so much to consider with women's health, and not only just seeing it as women's health, because women's health impacts everything else, right? Within families, within communities. So if women are not well, then it's not just, okay, that's their problem, right? It's a bigger impact on the larger picture. So that's also something to kind of think about when we're applying our thinking to helping this issue.
You really know your stuff, and I was just listening with amazement, and I like that you rightfully center women as the cornerstone of society, because I mean, we're the givers of life and we're the sustainers of life, so to speak. So when you talk of the lady from Thika, I was just thinking, what can I do? Maybe you need to talk to me at MN Legal and do something pro bono for that particular lady. Now, coming back to the panel, I know we've taken well over an hour in this amazing discussion, and to be very frank, the role of lawyers in the fight for affordable healthcare has been well tackled tonight, in my opinion. Oh, it's at night in my part of the world, in this particular conversation, and I'm very proud of that. So maybe I would like to invite each of the panelists who are still here to tie that in. Give us your 1 minute takeout. What is it that you want to take for lawyers and every person who will be watching this, because it's streaming live on YouTube and it will still be accessible for days to come? What would you want them to take home from this one? Again, I will go by way of seniority. I'd like Mr. Moyo to go first, and then Dr. Steve, followed by Samira.
Well, I think what comes out of this, firstly, if I may start from where we ended, is that firstly, as lawyers, we have to fight inequality, because inequality is at the center of it all. I mean, when you say, women suffer the brunt of this and that, it's really because of inequality that they suffer the brunt of what they suffer. So, and most constitutions in our countries provide for equality, the right to equality, and we're just not enforcing that right to equality. Gender equality is at the center of everything now, in the workplace, in our homes, in politics. Gender equality is at the forefront of our discussion, yet it is not being adequately enforced in our countries. And that's because we're not litigating sufficiently to ensure that there is equality. Secondly, all these issues really emerge from environmental factors. The environment in which we operate is not safe for our health. The environment in which we operate generates diseases that threaten our health. The environment in which we operate burdens our health systems, and our countries, as a result, are not able to afford ensuring that everyone has access to healthcare. So as lawyers, we ought to start working very hard to ensure that ESG matters are observed in our countries. Thirdly, again, related to inequality, is the fact that we're not really getting the benefits of our resources. I did mention that Africa is half of the world's gold and 90% of the world's platinum, 60% of the world's cotton. There's absolutely no reason why Africa should be as poor as it is. And one of the reasons why it is as poor as it is that we have not crafted laws that ensure that there's a balance between protection of investment and the protection of the developmental rights of the communities where the investment takes place. These are issues that we should attend to as lawyers to ensure that our countries do develop, to ensure that Africa does develop, the third world does develop. So at the heart of what we have been talking about are really human rights issues that lawyers should be dealing with. These are issues that IBA has been working on. I mean, if you look at, for instance, the ESG matters, there is a program within IBA dealing with ESG matters. If you look at issues of inequality, there is a commitment by IBA and there are programs by IBA to try to ensure that there is equality in the world in which we operate. The issues of unavailable vaccines in some parts of the world, I think you will have noticed that one of the very first statements that I issued as president of IBA was around that very issue, that, instead of focusing on intellectual property rights, we should be focusing on people's health, because, if one part of the world is affected, the rest of the world becomes affected. We saw that with COVID. One part of the world got affected and the rest of the world was affected as a result. So it's time for us to try to work together to ensure that, we observe human rights. We put human rights ahead of most of the things that we do.
Wow, thank you so much, Mr. Moyo. You've really given us a nice, summary of things we need to do, and I've noted those ones. Thank you. Dr. Steve, what is your takeout for us?
Thanks, Mbula, and Mr. Moya has done quite a pretty decent job in summarizing some of this, but I'll just say in one or two sentences, access to quality health is a fundamental human right, and therefore you as lawyers need to help us ensure that it's not subjected to forces of social classing, because that would be very, very dehumanizing, because it should not be a privilege to access quality healthcare. So if we can have, lawyers have good legislation for this, would be very good. And lastly, just linked to that is that health is linked to development. And for development to occur, there has to be a good tax regime that ensures, you do not tax an unhealthy population. So because if you tax an unhealthy population, then you're not going to have good development, as it were. So there has to be a way that we have that moral responsibility as learned fellows, so we protect the population at large. Thank you.
Fantastic. And I hope, Dr. Steve, we can create some amazing changes in the future. When we call on you, I hope you're going to answer.
Sure, definitely. I will.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. Ms. Samira, please.
Thank you so much, Mbula, for this conversation. Likewise, I feel like my fellow panelists have covered a lot and gave it a good summary. I think from my side, I'd just say stories will always reveal the answers, and listening is a key foundation to implementing change and improving health outcomes. I think, it's important not to just keep doing what we've always done and expect a different result. So that community ownership and empowerment in initiatives is crucial, as there's always been champions doing the work and who have been there doing the work long before any outside involvement. So we need to tap into that and elevate that. And, Chronicle Health is here to help bridge that gap. So please don't hesitate to get in touch if there are opportunities to collaborate and integrate storytelling into your work. And of course, I encourage lawyers to continue to further explore their place within this work as well. So thank you for today's conversation.
Thank you so very much. As for me, I must say that I'm going to leave this particular panel discussion a better lawyer than I was a few minutes or hours ago when I joined it. It's been such a learning experience, such eye-opening encounter with such brilliant people on my panel, whom I'm so privileged to have interviewed or even just had moderated this particular panel discussion. I was just thinking when you were talking, Mr. Moyo, am I actually interviewing the president of the AIJA? Who am I? That's quite it's no mean feat, I must say. Thank you so much for your generosity, your humility, and also creating the time to be here. Same as Dr. Steve, such an accomplished fellow, and Ms. Amira, who you're also doing amazing stuff. I'm looking forward to definitely furthering this discussion, because one day's conversation will not change anything for us. However, it will plant the right seeds in the right minds, whom I believe that this content is going to fall in their hands thanks to technology, because we're going to have it on YouTube, I believe, for the rest of YouTube's existence. So thank you so very much. Mr. Chigete, before he left, he texted me, he said, this has been fantastic. I must thank all of you on his behalf. He found it this very encouraging, uplifting, and educational. And he would like for me to organize another maybe a roundtable. It does not have to be through AIJA, but just in case AIJA is willing to have us do this, we must be available, I hope. And I would be very happy to further this particular discussion. I'm a very big collaborator myself, just like you, Ms. Samira, and I'm always encouraging people to collaborate because I believe in teamwork, making for the dream work. So once again, thank you so very much. I'm so humbled and so blessed to have had this amazing conversation. Special thank you and congratulations to AIJA and all the other international organizations who have been able to come together and sponsor this 24-hour rule of law webathon. I'm looking forward to having you all again next year or even sooner and many years to come. In my language, you say asanteni. In English, they say thank you. I don't know what you say in your language.
Thank you.
Fantastic.
Asante.
Bye-bye.
All right.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Thank you, Mbula. Thank you, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Thank
Thank
you so
you.
much.
Bye-bye.
Thank you,
Okay.
Oreste. I see you're writing that, of course, we will organize more panels. Fantastic.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
Bye.
All right, good night. Bye.
Thank you, everyone. should not be a little bit more uncomfortable about how the rule of law works in our countries to assure that the maximum impact and assistance is made to economic and social development. We hope and trust that you will all participate. The 12 panels during the day will be very well thought out and carefully prepared, and we look forward to your participation. Thank you very much. uncomfortable about how the rule of law works in our countries to assure that the maximum impact and assistance is made to economic and social development. We hope and trust that you will all participate. The 12 panels during the day will be very well thought out and carefully prepared, and we look forward to your participation. Thank you very much. more uncomfortable about how the rule of law works in our countries to assure that the maximum impact and assistance is made to economic and social development. We hope and trust that you will all participate. The 12 panels during the day will be very well thought out and carefully prepared, and we look forward to your participation. Thank you very much. uncomfortable about how the rule of law works in our countries to assure that the maximum impact and assistance is made to economic and social development. We hope and trust that you will all participate. The 12 panels during the day will be very well thought out and carefully prepared, and we look forward to your participation. Thank you very much.